Today I'm going to talk about something that's quite near and dear to a lot of South Africans' hearts, actually pretty much everyone, which is the price of fuel. Because we have recently had literally the biggest increase in price ever in the history of the country. So everyone's feeling quite under strain because the price is now the highest it's ever been, and it's regulated by the government. So this is not the fuel companies setting the price themselves. It's the government that regulates the price. Now, first of all, we pay tax on various fuel levies on our fuel, and at the moment for petrol it's 36%. So alright, that's pretty high. That's quite a lot. It's over a third of the price is taxes. Okay, fine. The government needs funds to be able to do things like fix the roads and stuff like that, right? Okay, well, unfortunately, if you're in South Africa, then you know that tax money very seldom actually goes where it needs to go. And if it does, it ends up being given to a company through a tender, and that company either does a terrible job or doesn't do any job at all. So we have a lot of issues with roads being in really awful condition when they shouldn't be. And this is the same in all the different branches of the government. All right. So the tax is high on the fuel, and most people feel that it's not justified because of the high level of corruption in the government. We're basically paying this money for a small handful of people to have a really nice life and have fancy cars and things like that. Now, the cycle that happens with something like the cost of fuel, especially in a country where pretty much the entire economy is driven by vehicles on the road, which means fuel, diesel and petrol. That's how goods are transported. That's how people get to their customers, and how customers get to their service providers and to their markets and things like that. There is not a very well established railway route around the country, especially for things like transportation of goods. Everything happens on the roads and trucks. So there are a lot of lorries on the road. What happens when you increase the fuel price is the cost of transport increases, which means the cost of everything increases. The cost for a person to get to their job, and by the way, the increase in salary was like, when does that ever happen? And the cost of food increases. The cost of getting your kids to school increases. Actually, school fees will probably also increase because now their running costs are higher. They have to pay their teachers more to try and keep up with the inflation of fuel costs, assuming, they would. Anyway, then the cost of importing goods is higher because now it costs the companies more to get the goods to where they need to go. So it has a very wide effect. It's kind of like a vicious cycle of the increase of fuel increases the price of goods, which increases the cost of doing business, which then increases the prices, and so on and so forth. And it's like just this never-ending cycle that just spirals out of control if it's not managed. Now, the whole question of how the economy functions and whether it's actually a supportive model for us to be following is a whole other story, and one which I'm not going to go into. For now, the next point is the image of South Africa at the moment is not very good. So in the eyes of other countries, South Africa is in a bad place. We have division in the country. We have We have this situation, for example, with the fuel costs going up. We have corruption in the government. So things like that tend to push the strength of the currency down, which has the effect of making it more expensive for us to buy things that are imported because we're paying in rands. And as the value of the rand goes down against the dollar, let's say $1 of fuel is going to be costing us more rands, even if the price in dollars doesn't change. So that's another vicious cycle that happens. As the exchange, or as the value of the South African currency decreases, the cost of living goes up, because the cost of getting in so many goods and services that come from overseas increases, because our currency is just not able to continue paying at that same price, because that's no longer the value of the currency. All right. Now, a very interesting fact is that South Africa exports fuel to neighboring countries. And even though we do that, the only neighboring country whose fuel costs are higher than ours is Zimbabwe. The other countries that we export to pay less for fuel, and not just like a little bit less, they pay a whole lot less, like the kind of prices that we were paying 5 years ago, kind of less. So there's like, it's a tough pill to swallow, because why are the South African citizens being placed in this position to have this much more difficulty in our lives to try and survive, when our neighboring countries can recognize that the cost of fuel is something that can make or break the livelihoods of the large portion of the population. So, now, what basically is my end point, or my closing questions within this whole thing? This is not just a rant. This is a reflection of what our values are, not just within the country of South Africa, because this is not an isolated occurrence. This is not something that only happens in South Africa. This is something that happens in a lot of different places, and also in a lot of different ways. So my biggest question is, how is this acceptable? How is this the way that we live? And everyone's just like, oh, okay, well, I suppose that's just how things are. So, all right, I'll just find a way to compromise myself more so that I can pay my bills. Well, most of them now. We can't pay that one anymore. Let me start deciding which of my monthly... Sorry, let me just get this cat away from the box. Let me decide which of my costs I'm going to stop paying, so that I can afford to get to work and to get my kids to school. How is it acceptable that we value each other in this way, where instead of giving each other rich and full lives, we are making it so difficult to survive that most of us are miserable, because most of us are just trying to make ends meet. We don't have the opportunities to do the things that we'd like to do. We don't have the space and the resources to really explore life, to explore ourselves within this life. All we're doing is just trying to get by. So I say we, because it's not the government that's doing this to us. We're all equal participants in this world. We all have to be part of creating change. And the way that happens is by, first of all, being willing to acknowledge that, yes, we are empowered and powerful in the sense that we can make a difference because we are part of this world. But also that it's up to us to educate ourselves as to what the issues are, how the world currently works, and what different ways we could start living in our personal lives that reflect the principles of what would create a better world for everyone. What are the principles that I can live that can be an example to the people in my life to show that it's possible to live in such a way where we treat each other with respect, that we give each other what we need to have a good life, that everyone is entitled and deserves to and has the right to have a good life. And that's something that each of us, in small ways, in our personal lives, can start living. Those principles that support heaven on earth. All right. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time. If you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon or on Steemit, which is like a social network with its own cryptocurrency. Otherwise, enjoy. Till next time.